Hey, today's quick and balanced growth moment is all about clocking out. What do you mean clocking out? So I had a client today who was really struggling with how can I be present after I leave work and I'm there with my spouse and my kids, but I'm still got this stress going on. And I asked him to think about a time when he wasn't always the boss. He wasn't the business owner. And he's like, yeah, I would just clock out. Precisely. Do you know right now, if we're looking at a playing field, and I mean like the playing field of business, I think of soccer. I'm coaching soccer right now. I've grown up playing soccer. Everybody knows the game of soccer, whether you like it or not. It's actually the most popular sport in the world. Google it. Where I've been on the playing field. I've played rec sports, competitive club. I've played high school. And, there's all these positions. There are the offensive positions and there's the defensive positions. When you're on the field, you usually have a assigned position, right? You're either in the offense or defense in some aspect. When you are off the field, your coach, assistant coach, maybe even supporting the coaches in some respect, somehow like as a club manager or a team manager or something like that. And you're not really on the field. In fact, you're typically red carded if you go on the field. Of course, you walk up and down and you're yelling at people and you're subbing people in and out and your assistant's doing that. You're running the team. Now, when you're in the ownership of the club, you're somehow up in the stands or you're watching it remotely or whatever. You're managing the operation of those who are managing the team. You're in ownership. Because you're in ownership, you're not usually at the practices. You're not telling people how to substitute in and out. You're not on the field calling the shots, being the captain. You're not shooting the goals or saving the goals from those who are trying to oppose you. That is super key, because when we're in business ownership, if we're still on the field, once you leave that field of play and the game is over for the day, you have to clock out. You have to, like you used to as an employee of some other company, literally take your time card. What I used to do is I take my pen on my paper time card and I'd write it all out and say, these are my times, here are my hours, right? I'm not thinking about my father's plumbing company anymore, but yet I go to family events and gatherings because it was a family business that I was a part of. My uncles and my dad and grandpa and even some of their wives would often be talking about the business. I get it. It's on their mind. They're stressed about it. They may even talking about jobs instead of just relaxing and actually clocking out. But I, on the other hand, could clock out, take my surfboard, say, hey, let's go, friends, let's go to the beach, or, go out on the town and have a fun time with friends and girls or whatever back in the day when I was working for my dad's plumbing company as a teenager. Unfortunately, business owners think that if they shut the door and leave their home office like I do every day, I go out this door and I'm done. They think if they do that or if they drive home, that walking in the door, stressed out about the business, thinking about it constantly is somehow going to help that problem. It's not. The reality is the more that you force it, the more you think about it, the more that you're stressing out about those issues, challenges, regardless of if you're in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or hundreds of millions. The stress literally is the same. Dean Graziosi has sold billions of dollars worth of product online with his coaching, with his infomercials, and he said this exact thing in the podcast episode that I watched just recently about him. He was being interviewed on the School of Hard Knocks. Google it, go check it out. Where they were asking him, what's one thing? He's like, listen, the stress is the same. So get used to just handling that kind of stress. And, if you want to be earning a higher potential, then earn that higher potential. But the stress is the same. So that means regardless of how big your business is, you don't have to flaunt your stress. You're not, maybe it's an ego thing. Maybe you think if I just show how important I am because work is so hard, Or maybe it's just that you don't know how to literally turn it off, like my client. Like, he's just like, I don't know how to turn this off. And, I had him count the cost. I said, what is this costing you? What is it costing you to actually bring this stress home with you and give this to your family? Well, immediately he's like, well, my wife is annoyed by it, and it really hurts her to be dealing with a lot of the stress that I have. And then of course my kids, and they see it in me, and it bugs me. And I'm like, what about your health? How does this affect your health? And we talked about the effect of stress on your heart, the effect of stress on, actually creating cancer and diabetes. It's all linked. Like, chronic stress does this to you, okay? And business owners who are typically working 72 hours a week, and then they're coming home, and then they're bringing that stress. Like, you may not actually be working, but your brain is stressed, right? So he counted the cost of what this is taking a toll on his emotional state, his mental state, his physical abilities. And quite honestly, the most important one is that relationship aspect. And I liken this to, respect. Men, one of the things that we want in most relationships, marriage, even parenting, we want respect. Love is different from respect, and that's a whole other subject in podcast episode. But respect is something that we desire. So if we feel disrespected, a lot of the time, we're not going to react the best. And I have overreacted on this many times, and I felt disrespected, and I've apologized and things, but it has to do with that of what our role is as fathers and husbands. We want to be respected and loved. So that said, I had my client put himself in his wife's shoes, and I said, hey, every time you come home and you're not clocked out here, you are still thinking about work and business and stress of challenges and things, and you sit down and you're just want to veg out or whatever. Every time that you are basically not present, it's giving her ultimate disrespect. How does that feel for you when you're disrespected? Oh, well, it makes me not want to be around that person and think great thoughts, whatever that is. So imagine what your spouse is now thinking when you're not present and you're not showing up. Now, obviously, there's a difference between men and women biologically, and women are more nurturing and accepting. And so, a lot of times women are going to try and figure out how they can help and soothe and console and love you and nurture you, because that is their God-given ability. Men, we're problem solvers. We want to fix it. We want to solve it. On a quick tangent, I watched a wonderful movie called Unsung Heroes by the Smallbone family. They have a band called For King and Country, the two brothers. And Rebecca St. James is a very popular Christian singer from the early 2000s, I believe, and kind of an Amy Grant style artist. I love their family, love their music, watched the movie, was blown away. But the dad in the movie, coincidentally played by, I think, Joel Smallbone, he was playing his dad in the movie. And he, the dad was constantly like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to solve it. And his own father was trying to coach him and tell him, hey, quit seeing your family as being in the way. They are the way. Boom, just blew my mind of how important that actually is, that comment, that they are the way. Your family is the way. So when you come home and you're stressed and frustrated, your family is going to feel like they are in your way. And a lot of times they may avoid. It's like when there's a stressful situation, it's this fight, flight, or freeze. They may avoid and just kind of walk away. They may want to attack a little bit. They may want to understand and push back, which is going to feel like more stress, right? Or they may freeze and just not know what to do around you. Is that the kind of relationship that you want with your wife and with your children? So think in your perspective what the disrespect feels like. And knowing that if your wife wants you and your mental state and your present, then know what it feels like to be disrespected and not feel like you're needed and not feel like you're a part of family, business, society, work, whatever it is. Okay? And know that that's probably what she or your children are feeling. Also know what it's doing to you to not be able to turn it off. So I've talked a lot about yes, you need to clock out. You need to turn this off, what's going on in your mind. So how do you do that? Let me give you a couple of really quick ideas and some things that are very helpful. I shared this early on in the government shutdown with COVID that I think are very helpful for most people. Number one, you need to create really strong boundaries of wherever you're working. If you're working outside the home, that's a pretty physical boundary, right? And we tend to think, well, yeah, I work in an office building downtown and I have a 25-minute drive and then I return and, I put on podcasts and there's a separation there. Okay, excellent. That's really fantastic for you. However, if you come home and you're still on your phone, texting, work coworkers and stuff and answering emails, you don't have great boundaries now, do you? If you don't have a great boundary or multiple boundaries, then your thoughts are going to return to work. Because at work, you have, how many screens, iPads, tablets, whatever, that are constantly buzzing, dinging, and getting your attention to take care of things at work. So if that's what you're bringing home, now it's just virtual. Now you're still connected to that office. You're not disconnecting. So do whatever you need to do. Turn off your phone, shut down all your email, shut down your text messaging, have a different text message number so people can't reach you, whatever it might be to disconnect from work. Because you're still an employee of that business. If you go back to that soccer field analogy, if you don't feel like you're owning the business just yet, you're not the business owners because you're still on the field. And the only way to disconnect from that field is you have to step off the field, get out of the uniform, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So that physical boundary of actually stepping off the field, subbing out, I'm done, the game's over, whatever, taking a break, it's halftime. You gotta get off the field, the physical boundaries. So the second is the uniform. What do you mean? Well, I wear collared shirts. These are pretty casual. Sometimes I'll wear with a business logo on it or whatnot. And so I have shown myself here, I'm working from home. And my physical boundary literally is the door right next to me, 5 feet away. Once I come out that door, I am no longer working. I am actually at home, okay? My family knows that, but the way that I show them this is I will replace my collared shirt with a t-shirt and maybe shorts if I want to go outside or whatever else I'm doing. Sometimes as soon as I'm done, I'll change into my mountain biking gear and I'll go hit the trails, okay? So I physically change my clothes. I remember when my dad, he'd come home from work, he'd wash up, he'd wear his, his collared shirt, and he'd come to dinner. And sometimes I didn't see him take off that shirt until the evening. And he'd go back in sometimes to his office and do some invoices and things. And sometimes you don't have the opportunity to change. Like he would come directly a lot of times from work to my soccer games. Or he would come to my practices. One of the most devoted dad, he was coaching sometimes 3 or 4 teams at a time so that his kids would have coaches that wouldn't scream and yell at them negatively, okay? I scream from the sidelines of my team and, words of encouragement, but that he really wanted that for us, and what a phenomenal dad. But I do remember that sometimes he'd kind of hang out in his shirt, but I noticed something when he changes his shirt as a kid. I'm not thinking about him at work. I'm thinking him as a dad. Your kids, your wife, they're probably thinking something very similar about you. You need to be able to change that physical presence, that uniform. Being on the field, change the uniform. And that will not only indicate to others that you are finished, but you physically are having a change. So especially for those that work at home, I honestly, even if it's from one t-shirt, like you have a t-shirt vibe and it's the black t-shirt or the blue t-shirt, whatever it is, and you want to go into a different, outfit, then maybe you need to dress up. When you go out on a date, like it drives me insane. This is another little pet peeve that like the women will always, like all the time, they're always dressed up looking their best, and guys are showing up in t-shirt and shorts and flip-flops. Now, if you're going to the beach, that's great. But you're not on the town or something, oh man, like show some respect for what you're doing. Change your venue. Don't go on a date in your work clothes. It's honestly, I know it's a little thing and you're going to argue with me about it, but when you're at home and you're saying, I cannot disconnect, it's just one thing and it will help. The third, and I think probably the most important thing is, if you've tried some of these things, you've tried to set boundaries, you've tried to change the uniform, and you've tried to notify the family, hey, this is what I'm doing, there may be some limiting blocks you have subconsciously about what's going on, and you're not able to disconnect. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the subconscious aspect. And really, I find that there are two main things that you can do. The first is some deep breathing exercises. Before you leave the office, for me, the home office, walk out the door, I will sometimes just sit down and do some really deep breathing exercises. And I will do that for, several minutes so that I can put myself in a psychologically different atmosphere. Okay. And I'll prepare for being dad. I'm home, I'm present. I'll tell myself, I'm here now, I'm at home, I'm not at work. And a lot of times that does the trick. When I used to drive, my commute was barely anything, like 7 minutes to a office in downtown. I would come home, and before I'd get out of the car, I'd just close my eyes and, imagine myself being home without any worries, any cares, and not thinking about work. Because quite honestly, unless you literally are a paramedic, a firefighter, a policeman, somebody that is a emergency personnel, your job is not putting out fires. Yeah, I put out fires all day long. I've heard a lot of service professionals do this, and maybe even some service professionals. I'll throw you in there too, because I know that my father would, as a plumber, he would get calls in the night, and he'd have to help people, emergency jobs. That said, most of us do not have a job that is emergency 24-hour around the clock type of situation, which means we can turn our minds off and be an employee and remember that we can clock in and we can clock out. So deep breathing. And the second is, you tried a lot of these things. Maybe it is the deep breathing exercises. Maybe it is, the removing the uniform, changing the uniform, in the boundaries. Well, maybe the last one is that you just have some subconscious blocks around not physically being able, consciously or even subconsciously being able to let go of work. That it's somehow so ingrained in your psyche, in your subconscious mind, that you actually have to get rid of that. Now, I've got a whole training on this in my coaching, but I'm going to basically give you the real quick and dirty version of this, and that is whatever that limiting belief is that shows up at that moment, like, oh man, I'm so stressed. If that's the thought, I am so stressed, I want you to quickly just replace that with one phrase that is the opposite of that. I feel so relaxed. That's it. It goes from, oh man, I'm so stressed, to I am so relaxed. As you reprogram your brain, being at home and not feeling so stressed out about everything, you will actually begin what NLP professionals, neuro-linguistic programmers, call, the reprogramming of the brain. Essentially what you're doing is you're telling your brain to, instead of continually give the same thought and the same reaction physiologically to what you're experiencing, you're actually changing the pathway in the brain that the neurons say, I'm going to go this way instead. And that pathway becomes stronger over time, so then that becomes habitual. This is why habits actually can create a long-term, achievement of goals. So you can go deep with me if that's not going to work, but I know that over time, when you're tackling these limiting thoughts and belief systems, that if you can just come up with literally the opposite thing and tell that to yourself, you can begin to reprogram what's going on. Again, clocking out from work, one of the keys of being able to have balance as you're growing your business. Thank you for joining me for another Balanced Growth Moment and podcast. I'm going to be doing these things a little bit differently. I'm mixing these up. I'm going to be doing more tips and ideas like this that come directly from my clients, from my day-to-day work, that I know others of you are out there really wanting and needing. And as we continue to build out this season of the podcast, I will be doing things a little bit different with my guests, and I will show that to you very soon. But until next time, remember to live life on purpose.